think about it. And when they tell you that you can't opt out, Lisa's going to get to it, but the state sent out a letter, and there's four times they're going to tell you no. One time, you tell me no. It's my right, it's my child. You don't have to go pick him or her up during the testing time. That's not even a possibility there. Your child has a right to be in school that day and not take the test. And we're going to have Attorney Stevenson speak about what your rights are as parents and stuff. And I just want everyone to know that we can do this. We're not just East Haddam doing it. This is happening all over the country. And I want you to realize it's really not you against the teachers. It's not you against the school staff. It's not your child against you. This is a group and collaborative effort, and we can do this. We can absolutely do this. This is our time, and if we act, we can stop this before it becomes an absolute nightmare. Not that it isn't already for some, but we can do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some speakers talk, and if you have questions at that time, raise your hand, so that way your question gets answered, because if you have a question, someone else probably does too.
I have one right now.
Go ahead, Kelly.
If you send that kid to school on Monday and you opt out of that test, all the other kids are being tested, where would my kid go? Obviously, he's not going to be getting an education. Everybody's being tested. So where would my son be?
It's up to the school to educate your son during that time. And
he's not being educated now. I mean, I can show you his report card. He's not being educated now. Where would my son be? Being left out?
Well, they'll know ahead of time that your son has opted out, and it is up to the school to provide an education for your son during the time of that testing, and it needs to be an education that is worthwhile, that's pertinent to the things that the kids are learning now.
And I would say, I do believe that this is still going to be an issue that has to be discussed with the schools, because, and you know my situation, but I did do the letter, I did opt out, and I have been informed that I would have to pick him up. I'm still trying to work that out, and I know what
pick him up for what?
Every time that there's a test. And so I'm still trying to work that out with Mr. Scata, and we're going back and forth. And I don't think it was really thought all the way out as to what this would mean if more than one student opted out, or more than 5, or more than 10. And I can only speak to how this was done in other districts where I've been, which was kids were sent to a non-testing room, and that's where they either did homework, or they did reading, or they did some kind of activity that was school related. They couldn't talk and play and goof around. It had to be academic in nature. But they had, they weren't teachers, but they had kind of like proctors, test proctors that were in the room, and that would monitor behavior and make sure they could answer questions if something came up. How do you do a problem? How do you do this? But they had to actually physically work. There was no active teaching going on, more like a very large study hall. And this was in a non-Common Core state, non-Common Core district. I don't know that this has been totally thought out or planned, and I don't...
And this is starting on Monday?
No. March 4th.
March 4th.
Monday.
When is that? Is that Monday? Yeah, okay, that's Monday.
Right, so Dawn,
Tuesday.
I just want to comment to that. Realistically, I think what the thought process, we weren't going to find out, because the assumption is you take a standardized test, and you wouldn't question it, because that's what's always been done. And then all of this information started coming out about SBAC and Common Core and all the problems behind it and what it really represents. And parents started saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to be a part of that, especially a pilot test where I'm just testing a test and my child's like technically a guinea pig, doesn't measure performance, so why wouldn't I want to do that? So then people start looking into it further. And they say, wait, I have rights here. This isn't approved by or endorsed by the U.S. Department of Education. It's not been approved yet by the State Department of Education. So they're like, wait, where's our take on this? So then that's where the opting out starts. So yeah, there isn't a system put in place, but that doesn't mean there shouldn't be or doesn't have to be.
Can I add one little thing right now? Stay tuned, because there's something called Teach for America, and I don't know how aware a lot of people are. But I think if the schools start crying out for help, there'll be teachers available, and they will
Right.
come from Teach for America. Now, Connecticut just agreed to spend $750,000 to send to Teach for America to recruit teachers to bring to Connecticut. And the money is just spent on the recruiting process. Now, Teach for America is a program, it's a movement, it's connected with AmeriCorps, and Teach for America is the United States version of another program that's called Teach for All. What it is all you have to have is a bachelor's degree in college, and Teach for America is actively out there recruiting in all of the colleges to take kids that otherwise will not have a job when they graduate college with a bachelor's degree, because there aren't a lot of jobs out there. So they'll approach these kids and they'll say, look, we have a 5-week program you can take and become a school teacher. And what we'll do is we'll give you that 5 weeks of training, and we will send you somewhere in the country you can sign up, and we can decide whether we want to take you or not if you fit the bill for what we're looking for, which is basically someone willing to teach Common Core standards. And you take these fresh out of college kids and you transplant them to another city somewhere in the country where they're not familiar, and you give them 5 weeks of training and you send them into a school and they teach. Now, I'm willing to bet that if our schools start crying out for extra help because there aren't enough teachers, because all of our teachers are tied up teaching SBAC and all kinds of other testing throughout the year, and we have a bunch of kids that are opted out, what are we going to do with them? Well, we're going to need a few more teachers. Well, not our good, terrific, real teachers that we have that put themselves through all kinds of training and really care about our kids, but some teachers that we're going to import from God knows where that aren't really properly trained. And I'm sorry I took your time, but
The other thing about Teach for America, I was contacted by a college senior this year, this weekend, who was contacted by them. They're also going to these kids and they're willing to pay their student loans.
Right. I actually looked into the program, and I was already going through the certification process as a teacher, and I couldn't get a job, or I knew what the likelihood of getting a job was, so I looked into it. And what deterred me from the program is they place a lot of the teachers, or a large majority, in very dangerous inner city schools, or at least that was in the early 90s, that was the trend.
I think that is
They're
still
still
the
doing
trend.
that, right.
They've been around for quite some time, and it is loan forgiveness. It's
Right.
just like if you
Right.
go through and you're a police officer and you go to inner city XYZ, well, you can get a loan for 0% interest and buy a house if you're willing to live in inner city land and be a police officer in that land. So this is another program, but it sounds like maybe it's Common Core line from what you're
very
saying.
much is.
I know they've been around for quite some time, and the whole point was loan forgiveness.
But that $750,000, that's coming out of our pockets as well. Maybe not in our town, but that's your state taxes that you're paying. And it's not even going to pay for teacher salaries, it's just going to pay for recruiting. That's what that $750,000 is. We take on those teachers, we'll be paying them as well.
Well, whether they use them or subs or however they choose to do it, I do not think that Mr. Scata in our district, speaking only to our district, I do not think that he has a full worked out, fleshed out plan.
No.
And I don't know the numbers, I'm not in his office, so only he could answer that question if he's had more than, I can only speak for myself, I know I didn't. So
Even if there's one under faith, it's required for
Yeah,
public
now, I
education.
did-
It's
He
not
has
an
had
issue.
more than one.
Okay, and as a
He says there's
backup-
a large group, so parents who are like, oh, I don't want my kid to be the only one sitting in a room.